On to our regular board meeting. The Village of Riverside Board of Trustees regular meeting of Thursday, October 17th, 2024. Please stand as you're able for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Clerk Soul, please call the roll.
President Polk.
Here.
Trustee Clarity.
Here.
Trustee Evans.
Here.
Trustee Koss.
Here.
Trustee Gallegos.
Here.
Trustee Marshaska.
Here.
Trustee Mateo.
Here.
Manager Francis.
Here.
Attorney Pickrell.
Here.
Also present, Clerk Soul.
Thank you. President's report this evening. I wanted to remind everyone of the general election coming up on Tuesday, November 5th, 2024. To locate your polling place, please use the Illinois State Board of Elections polling place locator tool on their website. It's the Illinois State Board of Elections polling place locator. Early voting begins October 21st and runs through November 4th. For a list of all early voting locations and hours, visit the Cook County Clerk's website. The nearest early voting locations for Riverside residents include the Brookfield Village Hall and Berwyn Recreation Department. Please be reminded that on Election Day, though, you must vote at your designated polling place. For early voting, any early voting location will work as long as you are registered. Regular voter registration has closed, but you do still have an opportunity to register to vote online if you have not done so. Also want to remind everyone that the Village of Riverside will have a street tax levy referendum on that November 5th ballot, and I wanted to take a moment to thank all the residents who attended our October 15th town hall regarding the street tax levy referendum. Recording of that town hall is available on our website and social media outlets. And as always, anyone with questions regarding the referendum or other village managers should feel free to contact myself or our staff. Upcoming meetings include Historical Commission at Township Hall, Room 4, on October 21st, Historical Commission here in this room. October 23rd, Planning and Zoning Commission, again in Room 4, Township Hall. October 28th, Parks and Recreation Board at the Riverside Public Library, 1 Burling Road. Upcoming events include Parks and Recreation Haunted House at the Scout Cabin. For only $5 a person, the department is excited to bring this brand new experience with both a less scary and a scary version. The department offers options for all those who wish to join for this haunting encounter. And that's Trustee Gallegos will be there to impart his fear. That's October 26th. November 8th, Parks and Recreation will host the first annual Decades Dance and Coat Drive, with this year celebrating the awesome 80s. The event will begin at 7 p.m. Come dressed in your best 80s outfit. We ask that each family bring a winter coat to donate for admission. Otherwise, tickets are $15 per family. We hope to see you there. Manager Francis, manager's report.
Thank you. Also talking about Parks and Recreation, they are rolling out some new amazing nature programs that will be starting soon. So if you haven't registered, go out and register. They include Nature Fit Adult Fitness Class and Resilient Runners Kids Club. Information is online, or you can contact the Parks and Recreation Department with any questions, but space is limited, so please register quickly. Additionally, I just wanted to provide an update. As you noticed on this agenda, and you'll see on upcoming agendas, we will be continuing our budget and tax levy discussions, which will wrap up tentatively the first meeting in December. That's all I have this evening.
Thank you. Resident comments on non-agenda items. Are there any residents in attendance who would like to address the board on matters that are not on tonight's agenda? You will also be provided an opportunity to speak for agenda items as that item comes up. Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda. Clerk Sol, please call the consent agenda.
Approve voucher list of bills October 17th, 2024. Approve Village Board of Trustees regular meeting minutes October 3rd, 2024. Approve Village Board of Trustees executive session meeting minutes October 3rd, 2024. A resolution authorizing the village manager to execute a contract with Municipal GIS Partners Incorporated and issue a purchase order for a total amount not to exceed $48,137.52 for 2025 Geographic Information System services. A resolution approving an amended license agreement for non-exclusive use of public property, train station occupancy and use, Gears to You. A resolution authorizing the village manager to create a purchase order in the amount of $321,016 for Christopher B. Burke Engineering to provide professional engineering services as part of Phase 1 of the lead service line replacement program, and review and file finance September 2024 monthly report.
Thank you. Do any of these items need to be removed from the consent agenda? Clerk Sol, please, I'm sorry, can I have a motion in a second to approve the consent?
Motion to approve?
And a second.
In a second. Motion and a second. Clerk Sol, please call the roll.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Costs?
Aye.
Trustee Galagos?
Aye.
Trustee Marjaska?
Aye.
Trustee Mateo?
Aye.
Motion approved. The consent agenda is approved. Department, board, and commission reports. We have nothing scheduled. Do we have any department or commission reports this evening? Seeing none, we'll move on to pending business. An ordinance requiring that funds generated in connection with the referendum to increase the Village of Riverside's tax extension limitation be used for street repairs. Manager Francis.
Thank you. As was discussed during our town hall on Tuesday, and also previously as we've gone through this referendum process, the board had directed staff and the village attorney to draft an ordinance relative to, if the referendum is successful, that these monies would essentially be earmarked for street repairs. And so I just wanted to take a note to read one specific whereas within the ordinance for both the board's benefit and the general public. Whereas the street repairs take many forms and include, but are not limited to, the construction, maintenance, repair, improvement, and resurfacing of pavement, bike lanes, pedestrian islands, sidewalk, traffic calming mechanisms, and improvements, and traffic safety improvements, the construction, repair, and replacement of traffic signs and signals, including the cement surrounding the same, making various street and safety improvements such as applying street markings, pavement rejuvenation, and crack sealing, and performing a variety of other activities that are authorized expenses under the Illinois motor fuel tax. And so these items, as specifically outlined in the ordinance, should the referendum be approved, would be eligible expenses that would be earmarked to those tax levy dollars.
Thank you, Manager Francis. I would add, just for clarification, because this is a question that I've received regarding the referendum many times, is a vote yes means that your taxes will stay level and the funding will be preserved at its current level or historical level. A vote no will mean that the referendum fails and that funding through property taxes for streets will be reduced. This ordinance is to show the village's intent that if approved, the funding will only be used for streets, and streets are defined in the ordinance. Any questions or comments from trustees? Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this? Seeing none. Again, I would remind everyone at home and in the audience, if you need more information about the referendum, please go to our website. There's lots of information, or contact myself or village staff. Motion and a second.
Motion is made.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Clerk Sol.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Costs?
Aye.
Trustee Galagos?
Aye.
Trustee Marjaska?
Aye.
Trustee Mateo?
Aye.
Motion approved. Discussion of recommended fiscal year 2025 budget. Director Zavala.
Good evening. Presented tonight is a proposed 2025 draft budget. And we could take a look at our 2024 projections for revenues are $12,155,197. Our revenue projections, again, are conservative for the budget, and we're budgeting for $12,294,160. The last board meeting, we did speak about the grocery tax, and I just wanted to give an update because that is part of a revenue. No action will need to be taken until next year, and October 1st is the deadline for an ordinance to be postmarked and mailed to Illinois Department of Revenue in order to keep that tax in place for 2026. Staff will prepare data and more information to bring that to the board next year to make an informed decision on that matter. The difference between last year and this year is $138,963 in revenue. On the right, you can see the expenditures for 2025 budgeted, 2024 projected expenditures ending at the end of the year are $743,002. And the expenditures for 2025 are budgeted at $12,206,656. From this chart, you can see that the expenditures are outpacing our revenue growth. And let's take a dig deeper and see what is driving those expenses. So here's one of the two major drivers driving those expenses up for 2025. We have our public liability insurance and our police pension contribution. Next year, staff will also gather data and present a long-term pension funding plan to the board to have a more in-depth conversation about the increase that's been happening in the trend analysis of the police pension contribution. This year was a 13% increase from previous. And then the second is a public liability insurance. This is our first year of completing, well, it's not over yet, but we're still on the first year of our new deductible of $100,000. Next one. And based on our expenditures that are due to end this year is about $634,000, and we're budgeted for $334,000. So the expenses are not making sense for us to stay in that $100,000 deductible. We received this new data from IRMA this week, which is optional deductible analysis. So they take our previous data from up to year 2023, this is our claims and our credits, and they prepare this analysis for us that tells us, how we would perform with each deductible. So we have the $25,000 deductible right here, and $73,000 would be, this is our savings, and the same for the $50,000, the $66,000 would be our savings, and for the $100,000, this is an increase in cost. This is based on IRMA's analysis. We do get a credit, a larger credit for the $100,000, but our costs are outweighing our credit at this time. There is no savings if you have a negative here. Staff recommendation would be to move back down to the $50,000 deductible based on claims history. There is a savings, and the credit, we still will receive a credit, and this credit is larger than if we would move down to a $25,000 deductible. And it's only a $7,000 difference right here in savings. So board direction would be to ask the board if we can move back down to a $25,000 deductible for fiscal year 2025. The budget is drafted on the $100,000 deductible at this moment.
Just to clarify, to the $50,000 deductible,
Yes, back to
correct?
$50,000.
Okay.
We've been at 100 for about 2 years now?
1 year.
One
This
year.
is the first year of that. And just due to our claims in the history, this is not an economically feasible choice for us. It would be better to move down.
And our experience modifier also is based on what our contribution will be this upcoming year. And so we are, due to a number of larger claims, so if you remember the big storms in 2022, it was great that we didn't have to pay that nearly $800,000, but that went towards our claims experience. So now we are seeing it in our contribution. So the contribution has gone up for next year in 2025. And so we have to wait for that storm to fall off. So basically, it's a rolling 5 years of claims experience. So it's basically 2023 through 2019 that they look at. That those are not great years. This is just showing you the credits and the losses within those deductible ranges. It's not showing you our total losses. And so typically, rule of thumb for IRMA is every 5 years. 1 year out of those 5, you're going to have a not so great year. We are not trending in that direction. And so from that perspective too, it behooves us to move to the 50,000. We're also internally as staff looking at tweaking some of our policies and approaches to risk management to mitigate future losses. But so that would, I agree with Director Zavala's recommendation of moving back to the 50,000 and then assessing it at that point sometime the latter part of next year.
So if staff is recommending this, and I'm comfortable with it as well, so 50,000 for me.
Agreed. Agreed.
Consensus then from the board to go back to the 50,000
Thank you.
deductible.
I did do a quick analysis of total claims from 2019 to 2023, and it was about $2,178,000. So it does make sense to go back. Thank you. Let's see, the next slide, please.
That's all I got.
Are there any questions regarding the budget at this time?
Any questions from the board regarding overall budget document? Manager Francis, could you, just for the public's sake, kind of give us a 1-minute summary of the whole budget process? Every year when we get to this point, it seems like we don't spend a lot of time on it, but that's because we've spent a lot of time on it. So,
Our budget process internally for staff started in May of this year. And so we start first with our capital planning, in which staff, we meet collectively and also at the department level to assess the village needs. That information is then submitted, then we review that as part of the 10-year capital plan. Then that is ultimately incorporated into the budget, so there's that phase. Then we also do the financial forecast to figure out where we are and where we're going with revenue and expenses. And so that's a separate phase as well. While we're doing that, staff is working internally on budget requests, what they're seeing as projected expenses. We're looking at revenues, whether or not we're covering our costs for different items that should be covering their costs. Example would be like building permits, and also looking at where those trends are. And so there's a lot of work that goes into the budget at a staff level. There are hours and hours of meetings with different departments and staff members, and Director Zavala has done an amazing job of navigating all those different pieces. We also internally review any of the different commission requests, and if we're able to make those work within the budget, then obviously we definitely accommodate those. Some of those we had to, across different areas, including different departments, make some minor adjustments and cuts, nothing that would impact service level, right? And so this is a multi-month process to make it so that we're putting out that information incrementally to both the board and the public to make everyone aware of all the different pieces that go into the village's annual planning and budgeting process. We do everything as it relates to best practices for financial planning, and that's really important too, to get sufficient feedback on all these different pieces along the way. But we do, bottom
Yes.
line is we have a balanced budget. We are not reducing any services, and we also included certain expenses for services like the 150 events, which is also going to be deriving certain revenue to cover some of their costs as well.
And we're not done yet. We still have next steps of the budget hearing November 7th, and we have estimated final adoption of the budget and levy at the December 5th board meeting, and we also have the year-end true-up for the IRMA per the financial policy that was adopted last year.
Thank you, Director Zavala, Manager Francis. Couple of things I wanted to just quickly mention. You mentioned the grocery tax.
Yes.
The state legislation doesn't take effect until the end of next year. The elimination of the grocery tax doesn't happen until next year, end of next year. So for fiscal year '25, we will still see that state collected grocery tax.
Correct.
But sometime before the end of '25, in next year's budget cycle, we will need to address that issue again. The other point that I think is important is, even if we don't implement the local grocery tax next year, we can do it in future years. It's an option that is available. At first, I think we were a little concerned that this was either do it now or never do it, but we have more flexibility than that. Also, I wanted to mention pension funding, because that's an expense that keeps going up, and we want to, we intend to come back before the board budget steps are taken next fall, and have more discussions about what our policies and goals are with the police pension fund. And finally, I just want to note that the expenses keep going up. It's just, everyone knows that our economy has been a high inflation economy for a few years. That's balancing out now, but still we were impacted by that. Our inflation of costs go up more than inflation of revenues, unfortunately. So we still, and credit to Manager Francis and Director Zavala, they do an incredible job to make sure we continue to provide the services we provide with ever-tightening budget. So thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments from the village board? If not, do we need a motion, or is that, no? No
Thank
action
you.
to be taken. We'll be back at the subsequent meetings with budget documents. Okay, moving on. Discussion regarding commission's role in reviewing signs installed by the village. Planner Siren.
Good evening. The Planning and Zoning Commission, the Preservation Commission, and the Landscape Advisory Commission recently expressed that they'd like to have a more formalized role in reviewing signs installed by the village. Their feedback was provided in your packet. The village board can ask the commissions for feedback on village-installed signs, and they have recently, notably on the gateway signs, but it's not a power for those commissions listed in the municipal code, so it's not required. So staff would like to know, should any or all of the commission's powers be amended to include providing advisory comments on village-installed signs?
Thank you. So you all received the agenda history and copies of minutes from commission meetings. So I would open it up to the board for questions and comments.
I'm comfortable asking for input from the commissions on an individual basis. And perhaps we could have done that when it comes to the new park signs, as someone who was involved in developing the signs. There were a lot of roles that needed to be expressed. And I don't know how many different ways we could have created the sign. And at the same time, we did remove a number of signs. Does anyone remember how many signs we removed?
Over 20.
22 signs were removed in order to put that sign up. I understand that the aesthetic was disappointing to some. And I just think it was kind of a lesson learned that, and I see from the minutes that the commissioners would like a say, and so I think the next time we engage in a larger scale project, that we can ask them to review it.
I think it would be advisable to have it as part of the code that it just automatically goes, so we don't have to remember on a case-by-case basis when these things come up, because sometimes the discussions that we have are multi-pronged and multi-layered, and things do get lost in the process. So I think that as a matter of course, if it just, went to them for an advisory opinion, it wouldn't, it would probably be beneficial for our board and future boards.
Yeah, I think just one more thing, go ahead. The only distinction between this sign and maybe other signs is that these signs were driven by our public safety needs. Our chief was engaged in the rules, and so I'm not sure how much feedback could we have taken. I'm not saying I don't want anyone to review the signs, just I don't know if we need to make it like we have to have them review every sign.
I think we typically do a very good job at involving our commissions, and I agree in this case, this is probably a lesson learned, and we are not perfect, and sometimes we make mistakes, but typically we are very, very good at this in respecting our commissions and getting their point of view. So I don't see a compelling need here to amend the village code for this purpose. I'm a little concerned with what might happen in a situation where public safety really is driving the conversation, and I don't want us to be sort of hampered and handcuffed. And so I think we should continue to endeavor to include our commissions and chalk this one up to something we know better.
Yeah, I would agree, and I would be concerned about setting a precedent of kind of carving out areas where the village board has to go to commissions for doing things. I mean, I think that the role of the village board, and it was actually really interesting to read all the different duties and stuff like that of the different commissions. I actually hadn't read them in a while, so that was really interesting. But I feel like, especially when it's public safety things, sometimes moving quickly is better and needs to happen. And I think this is adding a layer of bureaucracy that in a small town that doesn't need to happen. And I think, I'm thinking of the gateway signage, which is the next thing we're going to discuss, which was sent down to, which was, the board said we need to get input from landscape advisory and preservation. So I also don't like the idea of sort of setting a precedent of limiting the village board in what they can do and kind of forcing an issue. I feel like this is kind of taking some of the oversight away from the village board and putting it with the commissions, and I'm not sure that I'm comfortable doing that.
Any other comments?
I'm not in favor of expanding the powers. Agree with what has been said already. And it's in our code already that Public Works shall receive comments from Landscape Advisory Commission and the Preservation Commission for things they're putting in public spaces. The Parks and Rec Board is free to solicit input from the commissions, and going forward with the survey, if there are new parks being planned or, hardscape, I hope that they will seek out input from commissions. And this board can and has, as you noted, we just asked everybody for input on the gateway sign. So I'd rather keep it to an ad hoc basis.
Yeah.
And I would also prefer to keep it the way it is, and if we do need an opinion, we can always ask them for it, but to require it, no.
Thank you. Anyone from the public wanting to comment on this particular issue? Seeing none. So it sounds like we have a majority consensus not to take any action. What I'm hearing is that we'll endeavor to do better as we did with the gateway signs as opposed to the park signs, but that amending the actual municipal code to require that approval would add unnecessary rigidity to the process. no, there's no action to be taken since there's not a consensus to make any changes.
I would note that I appreciate their thoughts on this and their comments and, of course, their dedication to serving the village. It's not like we don't listen to their advice.
Thank you for that. That's important to note. We certainly, this village depends on those volunteers you know, to get things done. So thank you for that. Moving on. Update related to gateway signage and designs. Planner Siren.
On a related note, the Preservation, Planning and Zoning, Landscape Advisory, and the EDC all provided in feedback on the designs and signs that the board had reviewed in July and then in August. Point B provided those designs. They also provided the designs that were included in tonight's board packet. And the designs that were included tonight weren't originally selected by the board a few years ago as part of the branding campaign, so they weren't immediately identified by staff as options that the board might want to consider. So the question is, would the board like to consider any of these elements or work from the attached designs in place of starting a new sign design process? And I'll bring these up if I can. Oh, thank you.
So just reiterate, these are a few years old. They have not done anything new yet based on
That is
what
correct.
we talked
These
about
are
tonight.
existing designs.
Thank you.
And I'll just add, Point B provided this to us because they didn't want to provide a quote to do additional signs if they had something that the board appreciated more so from the initial branding campaign and design campaign that they had done previously.
Can I just get a point of clarification? So I'm just trying to understand. So a previous board, for lack of a voted in or approved a signage concept, right?
Mm-hmm.
And now we're not follow, we're trying to decide whether or not we're going to follow that?
Well, I think
I'm not understanding. I guess I'm not understanding.
since I'm the only one that was on the village board back in, what was it, 2018, I think?
Yeah, 17, 18.
We essentially approved a gateway and wayfinding sign plan.
Right.
And we partially implemented it. You see some of the signs downtown. You see some of the signs by the high school
Right.
directing zoo traffic to come to our downtown. And it had a buffet of different sign options that could be used in different locations,
Okay.
but all had a common design element to them.
Okay.
When the Harlem and Long Common opportunity came up, and then subsequently the Harlem and Burlington opportunity came up, we came back to the board this summer and said, hey, here's the gateway plan. Which one of these do you want to go with at these locations? And we got feedback, none of them, or maybe a whole different kind of sign, or let's go a different direction. And so we kind of said, okay, we need to step back, involve our committees again, because those committees were involved in 2018.
They were
They
involved.
were definitely involved.
Okay.
And they were, I think that what ended up being approved was recommended by essentially all of those committees, or the
Okay.
ones that were involved at the time. So given the direction to look at different types of signs, we went back to the committees and commissions and said, what do you think? My summary of what I think I read and heard from all the committees and commissions was it needs to be simple, subtle, background kind of signage, not prominent like the light or water tower masonry sign. And so when I see that, when I hear that from our committees and commissions, I look at these, what I call pole signs. If you'll scroll down, I think there's a couple of different, go back up. Yeah, down one, there. So that was one option. And then go down like maybe two more or three more. Yeah, that one. That's actually what got implemented on Burlington Street it's not Burlington,
It's
Ridgewood.
on Ridgewood.
Ridgewood by the
By-
zoo.
Okay.
That's the design that got implemented there. I personally think that's consistent with what our committees and commissions suggested. It's simple, it's background, it's more, not really, it's more about branding than it is directing traffic. Because on Harlem, I don't think you were going to get a sign big enough that we're going to catch people's attention driving by. But it's more about branding. You know, they know they're going to Riverside, and now they see our brand. So I personally feel strongly that that gateway pole sign in this option 2 is ideal. It matches what we've done in other locations. It's simple, it's elegant. And so I strongly favor that particular sign. But there are other options, and that's what we're here for, is to hear from the board.
Okay, and so I guess my question kind of more was, are everything we're seeing and deciding with tonight, do they still fit into the gateway signage plan that was already?
Yes.
Okay, that's
Well,
what
well, these do. I mean, this, options 1 and 2 certainly do.
Okay,
I think option 3 was, I don't remember that being in the gateway plan.
Of the original that you've seen previously, or that's in tonight's packet?
Well, scroll down to option 3,
I don't like option 3 at all.
so we don't need
so
to
maybe we
scroll
don't need to
down.
worry about it.
Thank you.
Trustee Mateo says no.
Yeah, this was option 3, and I don't think that, I mean, while that's a fine-looking sign in another location, that's, to me, that's, especially that vertical gateway sign is not what our committees and commissions were suggesting.
Yeah.
They were suggesting something simple and elegant.
Well, one of them did want black something, didn't they?
I mean, I'm summarizing the consensus. Yeah, there were individual comments about different types of signs that weren't all negative, or some were positive, but the consensus seemed to be to stay away from anything but a simple black pole. And given that we've used the side hanging at other locations
Right.
rather than the middle hang like this one, it would seem to make sense to me just to stick with what we've been doing.
I like the one that you like. I like
Option
that
2?
one. What was that, option 2, the one furthest on the left? That was the one
Yeah.
Yeah, with the leaf branch
Yeah.
underneath, yes.
that said historic, that says historic landmark. It doesn't have like arrows or, yes.
Yeah, I mean, these
okay.
are all the same except for the message on the sign.
Yeah, I like that it
Obviously,
says National Historic
For Harlem
Landmark.
Avenue, we would want the, just the basic
Yeah.
gateway sign.
I like that.
What's the basic gateway sign?
Gateway pole sign, the one that just has the Riverside logo, the first one on the,
All the
first
way on
pole
the
sign
left.
on the left.
Right after the monument one.
Yeah.
Which gateways are we talking about? Just Harlem and
Long time.
Long Common?
And Burlington.
Right.
We have the opportunity to do both now.
It looks a little small. How many feet is it? Anybody know?
We got to be able to walk under it, right? It's gotta be-
Well, these are just ideas for point B to act on. So it's starting points, right?
So that's the larger question. If the board is like, we really just like the gateway pole sign, then we don't actually have to get a proposal from point B. Then it's just working with Burke to figure out placement of it. And presumably we'd still want to do some sort of planter on Harlem Avenue and Long Common by Shining Smiles in addition to this piece. But at East Burlington and Harlem, it could be that we just have this gateway pole sign and we tell Starbuds, we still want you to do the planter and the additions, but our signage is gonna look like this, and you don't have to incorporate that as part of your design.
So are we no longer considering monument signs?
Question for the board.
That's my recommendation, is not to consider monument signs. And I think that's consistent with historic preservation, LAC, and planning and zoning's recommendation. They were really seemed to get the most consensus out of the idea that it should be subtle and simple.
That was my take as well, but I thought they were thinking of a monument sign, or maybe I'm just
putting my desires onto what they were saying, but that was my take. It's not just a pole sign, they were okay with something, with bulk, I don't know.
And just reviewing their comments and kind of trying to, I made a little matrix for myself to keep track, so there's a lot. I did see that there was mixed support and preservation in the Planning and Zoning Commission for some sort of gateway feature. A couple of our Planning and Zoning Commissioners were foursquare against it. And then on LAC and EDC, they were generally in favor of some sort of gateway feature, including a sign, not necessarily a monument sign, however.
Thank you.
Well, I also like the idea of not having to go to point B and, excuse me, and spend money there if we don't need to. I mean, unless like people are feeling strong about a monument sign, or I like the idea of saving some money.
So as an alternative, if you're saying, we like this option for our branding, but we want you to come up with a couple options for the Gateway Monument, if that is the case, they said that'll save you money because they're not starting from zero.
Okay.
Like, they have the baseline, we like this, but we need more options. We don't like that gateway, or we want something slightly different for the gateway pole. They can do that. Obviously, there's limitations to that, but, you know,
Right.
it becomes easier. But it's much easier if you select.
Just say, we want that one.
Correct.
Planner Siren, did EDC weigh in on a monument sign?
They did, let me check my notes here. They were in favor
Of monument.
of a monument, not the water tower, however. The water tower feature they did not
Yeah.
like.
Which committee was that?
EDC.
EDC.
Yeah.
And EDC was the guiding force for all the branding,
Right.
various related items.
My concern with a monument sign is they tend to be more intrusive. Every village has some kind of monument-type sign at their entryway, and we're different. In my view, I think, you know, something subtle like this is just, to me, is a whole lot better than a large monument sign or something. But that's personal opinion, aesthetics, you know, everybody has a different view. So if the board wants to keep it simple, just go with this gateway pole sign, which a couple of us at least are in favor of, we can do that. We could engage Point B and ask them to come back with some other options, including a monument sign, if that's the consensus. But we would need to decide how we want to proceed from that.
Well, my reading of, when I looked through the minutes and stuff like that, also came back to our discussion, which was, especially at Harlem and Long Common, that was such a busy, like, there's so much going on in that intersection already that we needed something simple there, just because we can't compete with everything that's going on there, so why would we, you know, maybe we shouldn't try. So that's kind of how I ended up with that one, you know, that one being my preference. I have to say, I love the monuments, the monument, or the water tower at, you know, by RB over there. I think it looks great there, and I think where it's sitting, it makes it looks fantastic. I also, you know, like last time we talked about it, I was like, I don't know that people are gonna notice it or see it. I'm kind of the opinion that, especially at Harlem and Long Common, to spend the money on that when I'm not sure that it's gonna be noticed or appreciated, I don't know that it makes sense. But that being said, I might be able to be persuaded. I don't, you know.
I think personally, the existing gateway pole sign with the leaves is fine. And we don't need to pay for a new design in connection with that. I will say that I think I was at the preservation meeting where this was discussed, and one of the concepts that came out was just like, nothing says Riverside more than a green tree, and a mature green tree at that. So they were very much in favor of, you know, having some landscaping component involving a tree be part of what we do and plan for that corner. It is a very visually busy
Right.
corner. And if there's a way to do it where it has the protection from the salt and the traffic and, you know, it's not going to get damaged at the site, I think I would be in favor of the combination of the pole and the tree. And, you know, whether it means you have to protect it with a planter or whether, you know, there's a way to otherwise ensure a barrier between the two entrances at Harlem and at Long Common. That would be good.
Yeah, it should be noted that any sign we go with, we'll still do the planter and landscaping and pavers and all that, and you'll get another shot at that. Once we decide on the sign, then if we go directly to Burke, they'll do a design, they'll come back to us for your final approval, and it will include landscaping for sure.
Yeah, then I'm good with gateway pole sign.
Me too.
I like the option 2, pole signs.
Okay,
Option 2.
that's a consensus, thank you. Anyone in the public wanting to address this topic? None. Staff has their direction. That's all it's needed at this point. Thank you, trustees, for that. Next item on the agenda is announcement of public hearing of proposed budget for fiscal year 2025 to be held on November 7th, 2024. Director Zavala.
Thank you. The Village of Riverside will hold a public hearing for the proposed 2025 Village of Riverside and Riverside Public Library budget on November 7th, 2024 at 7 p.m. A copy of the draft budget will be available for public inspection at Village Hall on this date. A public notice will also be published in the October 30th edition of the Landmark.
Any questions on the announcement? Thank you, Director Zavala. No action to be taken. Next item on the agenda is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of waterworks and sewage revenue bonds.
Are you guys tired of me yet?
Yeah.
Thank
Of the
you.
Village of Riverside, Cook County, Illinois, in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $4 million for improvements to the waterworks and sewerage system of the village through the replacement of lead service lines. Director Zavala.
Thank you. Effective January 1st, 2022, the Lead Service Line Replacement and Notification Act became law in Illinois. This law requires the village's initial phase of the replacement plan to be submitted to the IEPA by 2024 and the final version due 2027. Once the lead service line replacement plan begins, the Riverside will have 17 years at a rate of 6% per total lead service lines to replace all lead service lines within the village. Since this time, the village has taken proactive measures to plan for this expense. And at the end of July 25th, 2024, the IEPA, Illinois Environmental Protection Agency, gave notice to the village of reserve funding in the form of $4 million loan reserved for 2025. The loan is anticipated to be a rate of 0% interest and has a repayment term of 20 years. Annual payments are estimated to be $200,000. And this is the CIP for the lead service line that was introduced in the capital improvement plan in September 5th. I broke it out separate from the water department so you could see exactly, because a special portion of residents' water bill is allocated just for lead service line. And those are the monies that we would pledge to repay this loan back. And 2025, we have scheduled projects of $4 million to coincide with this loan. And we have enough fund balance and revenues from that special portion to cover the debt service ratio required for the loan. And I can see if you can see right here. That would be the loan repayment. It kind of goes across 20 years. And then we have enough. Debt service coverage is 1.25%, which would be $250,000. and there's enough revenues derived from the rate increases that were approved previously based on a smoothing technique to minimize the impact to residents. If this loan were, the ordinance authorizing the issuance of the bonds for this loan were approved, the village will still stay on the schedule that was approved with the smoothing technique. Are there any questions I can help answer?
So in summary, this is a $4 billion no-interest loan that will allow us to
Yes,
implement or
and-
replace lead service lines.
Yes, and this is just the authorizing ordinance. This is needed in order to complete the application of the
Okay.
loan. This is not the acceptance of the loan at all. And the notice will also be published in the Landmark on the October 23rd edition, notifying the residents of the intent to move forward, because this loan does not require a referendum, but it does require public notice, and then the residents do have a certain period of time to petition.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments from the board?
I move to approve.
Anyone in the public, and anyone in the audience wishing to speak to this item? There's none. Would someone like to make a motion?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
Motion and second. Any discussion on the motion? Clerk Sol.
Trustee Clardy?
Aye.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Koss,
Aye.
Trustee Gallegos?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Mateo?
Thank you.
Motion approved, ordinance approved. Discussion regarding standards and deadlines for building demolitions and site restoration. Planner Siren.
Thank you. We have, for your consideration, 2 minor changes to the code, or hopefully potentially minor changes. The first was a suggestion from a citizen related to demolishing buildings. Currently, when the village issues a demolition permit, there are certain things that the applicant must do to reduce nuisance to neighboring properties. That does not include getting a pest inspection and any associated abatement. That could be an issue with some of our properties that have been abandoned for some time before they're purchased for renovation. So the question is, would the village board support amending the code to require a pest inspection, and if pests are found, abatement prior to the issuance of the demolition permit?
Yes.
Yes.
Check.
I think we have consensus.
Wonderful, thank you. Bring that ordinance for your consideration. Hopefully another dunker is, would you like to clarify the code to do what we're currently trying to intend, which is to make sure that sites that are demolished are completely restored within 60 days of demolition. Currently, the code is just a little bit imprecise. We'd like to clarify that with the proposed language in your packet.
What do you mean by restored exactly?
That would be filling in a depression, seeding and stabilizing, removing the fence, removing any equipment and materials. That's assuming that they don't have a building permit ongoing to build a new house. So if you have just a site, it's got to be completely restored 60 days after demolition, which is currently what we try to require. It's just the language in the code isn't precise enough for us to very clearly present that as the standard to the applicant and enforce it as clearly as we'd like.
And you're proposing a restoration plan as part of the permit process?
That's correct. We currently require a grading plan. We want an entire restoration plan, so it's just very clear what we expect from the applicants.
This is great.
And yes, I'm fine with
Yeah.
that.
Consensus on that as well.
Thank you.
Anyone from the public wanting to address this item? No? Staff has direction, and that'll come back to us in the form of an ordinance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bringing it to us.
A motion to approve the updated Village of Riverside pavement evaluation study conducted by village engineer Tracy Weiss of Christopher B. Burke Engineering Limited. Village engineer, or Dan, I think is going to open this up.
So just some background information on this pavement evaluation. The last one we conducted was 2014, and this is a study of all the village roads and a condition that's associated with them at the time. This is a document that we use heavily during our CIP discussions and trying to forecast projects in conjunction with road conditions to save as much money as possible and make sure that we do it in an efficient manner. So we're not wasting funds and digging up roads multiple times. So without further ado, Village Engineer Tracy Weiss will give us an update on the most recent pavement evaluation that was conducted this year.
Good evening. As Dan had just mentioned, a pavement management program is really, can we go to the first slide after this, sorry, is really important to maximize the pavement's useful life, postpone expensive pavement rehabilitations and reconstructions, improve the ride quality of the roadway system, and provide a cost-effective way of protecting the village's pavement infrastructure. This spring and late winter, I inspected 30 miles of Riverside's roadways, and I rated them by, can we go to the next slide, sorry, by the pavement condition index, which is going to be referred to the rest of this presentation as the PCI. Those ranges between 0 and 100, 0 being a perfectly failed pavement, and 100 being a newly resurfaced or reconstructed roads. The roadways were rated by a visual inspection looking for potholes, cracks, other signs of distress, and overall rideability. Typically, roadways start needing to be scheduled to be resurfaced after they are lower than the PCI of 70. Next slide, please. Currently, the overall pavement status is 75, which is a good PCI rating. If you look at the chart on the lower right, this is the comparison between the 2014 study and the 2024. In 2014, we had a PCI rating of 73, so we're relatively the same, although looking at this bar chart, you can see that the distribution of the different categories is definitely a lot different. When you look at the pie chart over on the left side, this is for the current 2024 PCI ratings, and you can see that 31% is in the good condition. If you can go to the next slide. If you look at the chart on the right side, this is a typical pavement lifestyle curve. So roadways typically start declining over time. It starts out pretty slowly, and then between year 6 and 10, it has the greatest drop in PCI rating, and then it starts flattening out as the roadway gets older. Right now, the village does 2 preventative maintenance techniques. They do a pavement rejuvenation application, which is just like a spray method that you put over the top of new pavements to maintain the flexibility of HMA pavements. This can add 3 to 5 years to the useful life. The village has also started doing crack sealing, which they put in any cracks in the roadway and along the curb line. This is like a sealant that you put into cracks that prevents moisture from getting into the cracks that can cause issues with the freeze-thaw cycle. This can extend the useful life 3 to 6 years on average. Next slide. Since we have a good portion, oh, I forgot to mention something. When you're doing these 2 preventative maintenance programs, you really want to do these 2 programs when the pavement is still in very good condition. It's very useful then. If you do it later, it doesn't help as much. So when we're looking at a full scope of a management program, we wanted to look at resurfacing and reconstructing the roads. I put together 3 different options. Option 1 is $800,000 a year, which was originally proposed back in 2014. Option 2, $1 million per year, and option 3, $1.5 million a year. The basic consensus of doing this is to find a way to make sure that we have a relatively distributed category. So like between the 40 and 100 PCI, we want to have no more than 20% in either category. If you look here, we have a lot in the fair condition when we project it to the 2034 projections, which I will talk about next. If you go to the next slide. For option 1, we have $8,000 per year. You can see that the PCI overall rating will drop to 64.5, which is not great. only 40% of the pavement area will have a satisfactory or above category rating, and 60% of the pavement will be in fair to poor condition. If you look at option 2, $1 million a year, the PCI rating will still have dropped some. It'll be at 69.6. Half the pavement will be in satisfactory or better condition, and half of it will be in fair to poor condition. If we look at option 3, which is CBO's recommendation of 1.5 million per year, the PCI rating will stay relatively the same. 67.1% of the pavement area will be satisfactory or in better condition, and 33% of the pavement will be in fair to poor condition. You can also see in this pie chart that the distribution of the different categories is a lot more even than it was in the other two. And that's ultimately the goal, is so that when you have even distributions, you can forecast better and then have a plan moving forward. Sorry. In choosing to incorporate a pavement management program, the village can move past, doing the worst first reactive approach, which a lot of municipalities get into doing. They're like, hey, this street's really bad, we need to do it now. If we can look into the future and come up with a game plan, and we can shift the distribution of what categories the roadways fall into, we can plan ahead, and then we don't have to tackle as many roads at once. In using these new pavement preventative maintenance techniques and forecasting, future roadway programs, I think we can understand what we need to do moving forward and maintain a good PCI rating so that the village doesn't have to spend extra money maintaining their roads. Do people have any questions? I know I threw a lot of information really quickly.
This is an excellent report. I did get to spend a little bit of time with it this week. This is exactly what the village needs, and it is a plan. I think it shows that we've done pretty well with limited funding for our streets, but it also shows that we should be doing better. Questions or comments from trustees?
I have a question. So the 2014 analysis projected that doing what we were doing, 3/4 of our roads would deteriorate, and that's when Burke recommended a more proactive approach to this. And so the village has done that with the crack sealing and the rejuvenation. And so would you say that that has helped us to keep our PCI about where it was 10 years ago? Along with resurfacing, of course.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong. We started doing the pavement preventative maintenance treatments 5 years ago?
Yeah, they were about 5 years ago is when the previous director started enacting some of that stuff, and we've continued it in various fashions. We talked a couple years ago about bringing the crack sealing in-house to cut some of the costs and have some more flexibility on that. So we made some adjustments along the way, but yeah, around 5 to 7 years ago is probably when we started this in earnest. And again, this is all associated with available funding. I don't talk about that. I don't. So I don't know how wordy you want me to get, but the report, and we take this report, it's a useful tool because it gives us a roadmap as to how we want to maintain the roads. Tracy alluded to $8 million, $1 million, $1.5 million in maintenance associated with the roadways. That's what funding's available. That's how much we want to throw at this, and optimal is 1.5, so we maintain that PCI of 75. So, but again, if the funding's not necessarily available, we do the best we can to maintain the level that we can afford. So, and the way we use this report is, like I alluded to, it's in the capital improvement plan, and we try to mesh various factors of that plan. So we have water, sewer, lead service lines as of recently, and then roadways. And to save the most money and cause the least impact to residents as possible, we try to mesh all of those together and bundle projects. We have a big one coming up next year on Gage Olmsted, sewer separation, water main, water services, patching, and depending on how the levy shakes out, the roadway as well. And then once we make these bucket projects, the amount of money we have left over, we then start tackling the roads off of this list in priority. So the low PCI ratings that are not directly involved in a project with a water or sewer element to it, those are the ones we start hitting in order of relevance. So while it's a guiding document specific to roads in a sense, we blend a lot of the water sewer elements into it, so we're not doing redundant road projects and wasting a bunch of money. So that's a summary of that without getting too wordy.
So in short, we base our road resurfacing decisions on water and sewer work or underground work that may be happening and this PCI rating.
Yeah, when we're sitting down with the engineering firm, talking about our 10-year forecast for capital improvement plans, this document is sitting right next to us. And we're reviewing it and checking it off as we go every year and amending that 10-year document. So it plays a crucial element in planning, for sure.
Any other comments or questions from trustees?
Well,
Yeah, go ahead.
the preventive maintenance that we're doing now has a line item in our CIP. So as long as we can fund that, that will keep happening. And then the 1.5 million per year is on top of that. So if we don't have the 1.5 million, we're still doing something to try to maintain our streets. That's in the budget already.
Yeah, that preventative maintenance usually is only good for pavements that are in the very good to good condition. So all the pavements that are below that, you can do some crack sealing and whatnot to that, but the pavement rejuvenation application doesn't work on, pavements that are already past good condition. So there needs to be both.
So can you clarify, maybe Manager Francis needs to answer this, the 800,000, 1 million, 1.5 million options that you showed, does that include crack sealing and rejuvenation or not?
No, those
No, it
numbers
doesn't.
don't.
Okay.
I think right now the village was budgeting, and correct me if I'm wrong, $50,000 a year for the pavement rejuvenation application and another $10,000 for crack sealing.
The crack sealing. That's correct, 50,000 for pavement rejuvenation. We actually upped that this year. And since we brought the crack sealing in-house and we purchased the machine 2 years ago, we have $10,000 a year budget for the actual product. That doesn't include, staffing time and stuff like that. That's just for the material that we lay out.
And then I would note too that we have 30 miles of streets. Did I read that correctly?
30 to 32.
30, 32 miles of streets in the village. The current funding source to meet that 1 million or 1.5 million is motor fuel sales tax, which
Non-home rule.
is, how much is motor fuel?
Well,
350, something like that?
I
Yeah,
would
it's
say
changed.
a little bit more conservative at the 250, because as I mentioned during our town hall, we're gonna start to see that decrease because of the purchases of electric vehicles. And so that revenue stream will slowly go away or diminish significantly. So we have approximately 250 that goes into the capital projects fund from motor fuel tax. We have approximately, and Director Zavala can correct me if I'm incorrect, approximately 300,000 in non-home rule sales tax, and that can vary from year to year, from 300 to 350 if we're having a great year, and that's actually a little bit up from what it was in previous years, which was around 250,000. And then when we had the referendum issued debt, that helped with that 2.5 million. And so we would do a number of projects. within the first 3 years of receiving that referendum debt, and then we would build up those other funding sources to help with the street program. If the referendum were to be approved for the tax levy, that would afford approximately $260,000 annually to be added to that 250, and approximately that 300 to 350. So we get closer to our 800,000, but obviously not exactly precise.
How do you remember all those figures?
I remember the 250 for Tuesday. I was pretty proud of that. I was like, I don't remember that.
Well, you add up those three sources, and assuming the referendum is approved, that's about 260 a year. That's, my math says that's about $860,000, 350, 250, 260.
Yes.
So that's,
Still doesn't get us to that ideal 1.5
1
million.
yeah.
So.
Now, we do.
And that doesn't include sidewalks either. That's
Right,
just streets.
sidewalks are separate. There's
Sidewalks
separate
are-
funding for that.
Well, we utilize motor fuel tax as a funding
Oh, okay.
source for that. So,
And we do occasionally have surpluses in the general fund that we move into capital, right?
correct.
But that's not something we can rely on every year, and as we're seeing this year, that gets tighter and tighter, so. Well, staff is looking for us to approve this document. We're not committing any funds to anything through this document, we're just adopting this as our, what's the official title of it? Our
Riverside
pavement
Pavement
evaluation study, yes. Anyone in the audience wanting to speak to this item? Seeing none. Any other questions or comments from trustees? Someone like to make a motion to adopt the Village of Riverside Pavement Evaluation Study?
So moved.
I'll second.
First and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Clerk Sol.
Trustee Clarity?
Aye.
Trustee Evans?
Aye.
Trustee Cost?
Aye.
Trustee Galagos?
Aye.
Trustee Marshazga?
Aye.
Trustee Mateo?
Aye.
Motion's approved. Trustee reports. Do we have any trustee reports this evening? There are none. The board does not have a need for executive session this evening, so I would ask for a motion and a second to adjourn.
Motion is made.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None. We are adjourned. Thank you all.